Macro and micro goals in the world of collecting are very weird, and it's unlike any other thing. So I had the same goal probably since 2003. We were walking around Gibraltar and they had first edition Charizards. I remember as a high school student being like, man, I'd really like to get one of these. But at the time they were already a few $1,000s. Retrospect, that was pretty cheap. But couldn't afford it, right? Still, one of my goals is to get a first edition Charizard. Whenever I see a trade request, I always see, hey, what are you valuing it for? Because that's a big macro goal of mine, right? Like, it's a big goal. It's not like a little one, not like where am I going next and it's on the way. It's one where I want to be able to afford one. I don't even need a PSA 10. I've always wanted to get one. My biggest problem has been most people who have one always overvalue it. People with a PSA 1 will be like, oh yeah, this is worth 10 grand. And you're like, for a PSA 1? No, it's not. But what's interesting about it is you can use the comparison of where you're at in the hobby and what you're doing, and just like real life, it's a lot easier to do those micro goals, right? Like I just hit a fairly big goal, consistently waking up below 240, right? Trying to do fitness, trying to do stuff. But it helped motivate me when I woke up again and I was 238. And that's after traveling and eating a little bit more than I should have, right? When you do regionals, it's just one of those things where you're like, all right, I didn't eat the best, where am I at? Well, now I'm motivated today. I got the day off. I want to work out. I want to do stuff. It makes it easier to hit that 235, 230. In the world of collecting, you don't always get that same like rush of hitting your micro goals. Because like ours, the big goal is a first edition Charizard, right? Well, what would be the micro goals to get there, right? Like first buy any Charizard, then buy a Shadowless Charizard, and then buy a move that up until you get a 10 and then sell that and buy a first edition. Like they're more of like steps to getting a card. Like mostly it's just making money, right? Those aren't micro goals to help you hit that collection. In the case of our collection now, what we've been doing, because the economy hasn't been that great and we're already making enough money to cover our costs and stuff, is we've been keeping a lot of our black labels. Well, we've been keeping black labels in largely to trade for other product. Currently, black labels don't sell well in comparison of their value. So what we can see is we now have a different micro goal. Our micro goal is learning to understand more about the market of what can get us the maximum results, as opposed to just trying to be like, all right, we're shooting for the moon. So that's kind of where you got to be if you're in this market right now. Everything's low. The first edition Charizard is a great example. We've seen some PSA 10 sell for a third of their price, right? Some go for 100,000, some are going for 40,000, right? If you're in that ballpark of trying to flip stuff for money, that's dangerous, right? Because you never know what's real, and it's not a good time to be selling things. Stuff like games. We see people very commonly right now moving NES games. Why? Well, NES games kind of exploded, right, in the last 10 years. I think it was Gary Vee who started the trend, got really popular. I could be wrong. Which guy it was, but like his like publicity on it and talking about pop reports kind of made it balloon. And when it ballooned, it hasn't really popped yet. So you see people trying to dump stuff and get cash. Well, it's partially because they got in for it for so cheap. You know, you could pick up a Legend of Zelda for a really affordable rate up until that balloon happened. And then suddenly, you know, they're 15 times the value. And then that's really what is important. Do your best, and for your micro goals, set a goal that has nothing to do with your goal, okay? Your goal should be data and information and trying to track what you have to see how much you've invested and where it goes, and try to get an idea of how well you're doing in trying to see where your asset is and what its value is. So if you buy a card for, let's say, $500, you grade it, it's worth $1,000, have a micro goal where you're like, all right, now I know I can move it at this price, and then keep track of it if you want to keep it up, or just have that information and be like, this is where it was. I'm going to sell it at double because that's the goal. And I'm going to buy something else that I really, really want, right? That's usually what we recommend, is if there's something that you couldn't afford beforehand, you sell a card. Hey, look, no capital gains now, right? You got rid of something for something else. But still keep track of where the card would have been, right? With Awakened Power, I always look at that example of back in the boom, we had a 8.5. And someone traded for it at like $6,000 or $5,000 because that's what Awakened Power was worth. But they didn't have any cash, so they just did a full trade. Well, we got some really great stuff from them. But they were like, you know, other people told us at the time, oh man, you're going to lose so hard on this. Awakened power is going to hit the moon, because that was the trend of wording back then. And then it crashed and died and lit on fire and then came back as a zombie and died again. And it's like, well, I'm really happy we got rid of it. But it still would have been cool to track to see how that progression happened, so we can get an idea of what cards and what rarity you have to do to keep value going up. Even metal cards. Metal cards, we see the dips happen, right? Well, 1 of 7s, that information shows us that even though they dip, there's always a certain blockade. Like metal cards that are 1 of 7 or something, they're probably worth a lot more money than what we're even getting right now. And then as cards get bought up and go to collectors, they just kind of like skyrocket upwards in comparison of what they cost you. But they don't move fast. So their value is extremely high, right? But their movability is almost non-existent. They are not liquid. So your micro and macro goals have to be something where you can track that information. And then your macro goal just has to be what you're really shooting for. And when you hit it, it has to be an item that you can hold. So one of your micro goals has to be the power to hold, right? Like you have to have that ability to be liquid, to be kind of in the moment without being afraid of like, oh man, if I keep this card, I'm gonna lose my house. Well, no, they have to be completely separate. You can't be mortgaging your house to buy your Charizard and probably feel good about it, right? Because if the price goes down, it's like, oh, I could have had a house. So it's a very complicated world to have these goals and get excited about it. And the honest answer is, at the end of the day, we haven't quite figured all of it out. Like I said, the little stuff we figure out is just enough. So if you got ideas of how you're managing yours, send it to me, because we're trying to work on our collecting goals. And besides getting information, I don't know what to do.